So we got the 53-man roster is out. I will be reading this to you. So here we go. 53. We got Matthew Stafford, John Wolford, and Bryce Perkins at quarterback. We have Darrell Henderson, Sony Michel, and Jake Funk. That means Xavier Jones was waived with an injury designation, and likely the Rams can add him to their IR if he clears waivers. Wide receivers, Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, Deshaun Jackson, Van Jefferson, Tutu Atwell, and Ben Skoranek. Then we have tight ends, Tyler Higbee, Johnny Munt, Bryson Hopkins, and Jacob Harris. 9 offensive linemen. They're keeping Tremaine Ankrum, so Ankrum is there. So we have Andrew Whitworth, David Edwards, Brian Allen, Austin Corbett, Rob Havenstein, Joe Noteboom, Bobby Evans, Tremaine Ankrum, and Alaric Jackson. We do have Coleman Shelton. He was placed on injured. He was placed on reserve COVID-19 list on Tuesday and does not count toward the limit until activated. So he is on the COVID list. They kept 7 on the defensive line: Ashawn Robinson, Aaron Donald, Sebastian Joseph Day, Greg Gaines, Michael Hoyt, Jonah Williams, and Bobby Brown III. They kept 5 outside linebackers. That does mean that, unfortunately, it is true. Surprisingly, Justin Lawler didn't make the team. We have Leonard Floyd, Justin Hollins, Obinai Okoronkwo, Terrell Lewis, and Chris Garrett. Inside linebackers, we got 4: Troy Hill, Kenny Young, Traven Howard, Ernest Jones. That means Micah Kaiser missed the roster. 4 cornerbacks, like I said: Jalen Ramsey, Darius Williams, David Long, and Robert Rochelle. And then they kept 6 safeties. So it is Taylor Rapp, Nick Scott, Terrell Burgess, Jordan Fuller, J.R. Reed, Juju Hughes, and they kept Matt Gay and Matt Orzek. And Johnny Hecker didn't make the 53 because he's on the COVID IR list. So they're keeping that. So to make a long story short, you have Coleman Shelton on COVID, and you have Johnny Hecker on COVID. So they kept Juju Hughes. He is staying for now. They kept J.R. Reed. Tremaine Ankrum did make the team, despite what we thought initially. And, man, this is a good-looking roster. You have to feel good if you're a Rams fan today. This is a deep roster. This is the deepest I've seen in quite some time. The Rams really did a nice job with this one. I guess my biggest, bummer here. So I think there's 2 huge bummers. The first one, you got to give it to, in my opinion anyway, you got to give it to Justin Lawler. Man, that guy, he worked his tail off in the first game. We didn't really see anything like that first game when he played in the next 2 preseason games, but I was surprised with how dominant he was in that first game. I was hoping he'd make the team. It sounded like he was in line to back up Leonard Floyd. That's not the case. But, oh, my God, Darius, thank you. I, too, am a Super Chat god. LOL, go Rams. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Guys, can we just can we all drop an exclamation point in the chat for Tremaine Ankrum making it? That's my guy. I'm so excited that he made it. Oh, my God, Darksaber. Gods think alike, Rams. We're going to be playing hard this season. Thank you so much, the Darksaber. Appreciate you. Let's go. Tremaine Ankrum made the roster. And let's give a shout-out to Juju Hughes making the roster. Now, this is the initial 53, and a lot can change. Coleman Shelton can come back from IR or COVID IR, whatever you want to call it, and the Rams have a decision to make. But at the end of the day, right now, this is your 53-man roster. There was no claim. Based on what I'm seeing here. So that's out of the water. There's no claim, so to speak. But I do have to give you guys a ton of props because, we're at over 150 views. The Rams, they're the Rams. So their channel, we were kind of at the same viewer rate. Now they're over 200. But really do appreciate you guys being here. It's a lot of fun right now. Yeah, but tomorrow we'll have the practice squad, so we'll have that information, and then on top of that, we're going to have more about the 53-man roster. So essentially, we're going to have the practice squad, but we're also going to have who gets put on IR and things like that. My guess is the Rams could fill up a lot. They could free up a lot of space because, if I'm being honest, with the now finding out about Tremaine Ankrum, he'll go on short-term IR. You have Ashawn Robinson, potentially. Yeah, potentially Obinai Okoronkwo. So that's 3. And then Skoranek broke his forearm, so he's not going to be ready for week 1. That's 4 guys that you could put on short-term IR. And this comes down to the best point. The NFL has made it a unlimited IR because of COVID. So the unlimited IR changes the game here, and the Rams can really put whoever they want on. They could just stash these guys. Keep in mind, you're kicking the can down the road when you do that, because eventually you will have to bring them back onto the roster or shut them down for the whole season. The 53 is an A, man. It's a really good-looking roster. I mean, I think it's a really good-looking roster. People are going to say they're lacking depth. You're going to hear all sorts of stuff, how the Rams need to trade for a linebacker because they only have 4. Another one I'll look at. So, the receivers. Some of you might be like, why did they keep Ben Skoranek? And if you say that, you probably didn't see my video. And if so, shame on you. I'm kidding. But, no, if you didn't see my video, you can check it out after this. It is on the channel. But here's the thing, is they kept Ben Skoranek because he broke his forearm. He's a 7th round pick that they like more than the 7th round, okay? They kept a 7th rounder with a broken forearm over a healthy 5th round pick. Remember that I said that. They kept a 7th rounder with a broken forearm over a healthy 5th round pick in Ernest Brown. Here's the reason. Because Skoranek offers the ability not only in the receiving game, not only as a receiver, but as a blocker, but also he could potentially be a tight end as well. So he could be another one of those flex wide receiver tight ends. He's got vice grip hands. He works really well on special teams. He's a guy that they wanted to contribute this year. That is what they're telling you. They could have IR'd him, and they could have been like, this is it for you. We're going to stash you until next year. Even with all the talent they have on receiver, though, they decided to keep him on the roster injured, risk losing a guy like Ernest Brown to make sure he's there so he can contribute this year on special teams. That says a lot, and they like him long-term. People that I talk to, they like him long-term. So, essentially, Skoranek, by keeping him on the 53, it allows you now to be able to place him on short-term IR. He can come back week 4. You don't have to worry about it. His season's not over, and no one gets their paws on him. And then, in the meantime, you're dealing with 5 receivers once you put them on short-term IR. Spot opens up, so you could add, somebody that's on COVID, the COVID restricted list, like say a Hecker or, Coleman Shelton or Tremaine Ankrum potentially, but I think Ankram's also going to go on short-term IR. So the point is, you can add one of those guys. But if it's not one of those guys and say they're still on COVID, then what you can do is essentially you can grab somebody from the practice squad and elevate them. Potentially bring back Landon Akers or Tristan Jackson or J.J. Koski or Jeremiah Haydell, maybe to help you out in the kick return game. And that is why you save Skoranek, because guess who was not making it under any circumstances out of the receivers? If you had to pick anybody out of the receivers that they didn't keep and Skoranek, guess who's not making it through waivers in all likelihood? Skoranek. Because teams love those guys that have the athleticism, that overall, obviously the size competition, but his ability in special teams is well known. And these teams all scouted him. He's fresh on the minds of a lot of guys, but if you cut a guy like Tristan Jackson with no preseason last year, only played a little bit this year, had a touchdown, but he wasn't like amazing. The only teams that really saw Tristan Jackson in person to, at his best, so to speak, the Cowboys in the joint practice and the Raiders in the joint practice. The Cowboys aren't going to get him because look at the receivers. They're loaded. I mean, they're 4 deep. I'm 4 truly deep. You have Cooper, you have CeeDee Lamb, you have Gallup, and then they added Simi Fehoko. They like Cedric Wilson. I don't know if they cut him. They probably did. Now I said that. Noah Brown. Like, they're deep. And then you look at the Raiders, and they're deep, So they, with guys like, of course, Henry Ruggs and Brian Edwards and, Hunter Renfrow. Obviously, we kept hearing about Hunter Renfrow the whole time. They weren't going to be threats. But Skoranek was going to, you see what I'm saying? Skoranek was definitely going to get claimed because recency bias, him being in the draft, this draft, whereas Tristan Jackson was last draft, UDFA out of Syracuse, made the 53 last year but never played, so there's not a ton of film on him. So he's more likely to come back than Skoranek, he's fresh on the minds of other teams. Another thing, Bryson Hopkins was never getting cut, guys. I said this over and over and over again, okay? Hopkins does more than he does in preseason. But furthermore, keep this in mind, he didn't have a preseason last year. So you can't make the argument for, Burgess or Terrell Lewis or Jordan Fuller or any of those guys if you're not making that argument as well for Hopkins? It's not really fair. So Hopkins didn't have a preseason, and basically, essentially, this is the case with that, okay? Hopkins didn't have he didn't have a preseason last year, and then this year he wasn't the best, so to speak, right? But I thought down the stretch, towards the end of preseason, I thought he showed you what he could do in the receiving game a little bit. Keep in mind, the opportunities weren't as much, for him there, because they really wanted to drive home the point of giving him reps in the trenches as a blocking tight end, a true inline tight end. He played kind of the same role right now that Jacob Harris and Kendall Blanton played in preseason, going back to Purdue. He was more of just a big wide receiver. He played kind of similar to Evan Ingram. But they're asking him to become a legit tight end. They want him to replace Tyler Higbee over time, and they want Jacob Harris to be his own entity type of deal. Okay, so that is why they kept Brycen Hopkins, and that's why he was never going anywhere. Johnny Munt has made significant strides, and he's on a one-year deal. So, as much as I like him, he's on a one-year deal. He might be the starter this year next to Higbee, but at the end of the day, you're still looking at a guy, at least in my opinion, that, he might not be back next year. And so it's going to rely a ton on how far along Hopkins' development is as an inline tight end. And if he's far along, then they'll let him go, I think. So that's what I'll say about that. And then, so we talked about quarterback, why Perkins made it, and they couldn't, afford to let him go. They couldn't afford to let, a lot of these guys go. They couldn't afford to let Perkins. They couldn't afford to let, Skoranek. They couldn't afford to let, Hopkins was never in doubt, in my opinion. The roster bubble stuff was ridiculous, but that's just in my opinion again. Respect everyone else's who thought he was gone, but I was telling you over and over again, they're not getting rid of a fourth-round guy who, in my opinion, I had a second-round grade on him last year. Just didn't really get an opportunity. They're asking him to make a huge transfer over to that spot. Another guy that they weren't cutting, I saw... now I can say it. I was shocked initially when I thought they did. Ankrum, because Ankrum has positional versatility. He can play all 5 positions on the offensive line. They've been raving about him. He took the left tackle reps, when Andrew Whitworth had his off days last year, his veteran off days. And, this is somebody that was playing at right tackle instead of Bobby Evans, instead of other guys. And when he got hurt, it wasn't Bobby Evans, it was Chandler Brewer. So, I think Ankrum was safe and, just a little bit of a scare, obviously, this morning. It's why it didn't really make any sense to me. So there was no way that they were, going to cut him. And then defensive line, there was no way that they, I saw how people are like, why are they keeping Greg Gaines? Greg Gaines has been really efficient. When Greg Gaines is on the field, things happen. Gaines is really good, guys. 4th-round pick out of Washington in 2019. Greg Gaines is a great pick. Now, here's the thing. Greg Gaines played on a defensive line, again, keep this in mind, with Michael Brockers, A'Shawn Robinson, Aaron Donald, Sebastian Joseph Day. So he's really been just blocked, right? And they had John Franklin Myers at one point, too. So, obviously he didn't make that team, but, Greg Gaines has been blocked, and so now he has an opportunity, and I'm telling you guys, if A'Shawn Robinson is on short-term injured reserve and he comes back week 4, that means Greg Gaines is going to start for 3 games in a row. I know there's already people like, oh, no, Bobby Brown. Love Bobby Brown. He's a long-term guy. He's going to have some upside this year. He's going to play, but he's going to play as much as Gaines did when he was, a rotational guy. And, rightfully so. Gaines, they love. Gaines did not play 1 snap in preseason. There's a reason for that. They love him, and he's a very good player. And when he is on the field, he makes things happen. Mike Tomlin said, when someone was asking about why Dwayne Haskins, he was asking, why doesn't Dwayne Haskins get first-team reps or second-team reps? Do you think that makes a big deal? Do you think, should we start to think that he's not going to make the roster? Or, and basically Tomlin, and I'm paraphrasing here, but Tomlin basically said it's not about, what reps you're getting. It's not about, what first team, what second team. It's about what you do with the opportunity. And I always say that because, with Gaines wasn't getting starting reps. Gaines was a rotational guy, but when he came in, He showed ability to rush the passer. He showed ability in the run defensive department. You go back and you look at his college stats. I think PFF had a graphic. Interior defensive lineman, he was up there with the highest pass rushing efficiency of any interior defensive lineman. He had a higher pass rushing efficiency rating than A'Shawn won't have to go on short-term IR. Okay, well, I'll stop what I'm saying about Gaines being a starter, but I think he's going to have a significant role. But I'll just further explain what I was going to say, that, thanks, Solus. Appreciate you. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun today. I'm glad we did this. A very good idea, apparently. But with Gaines, guys, is that, PFF had a what the hell am I thinking of? A graphic. And he had a higher pass rushing efficiency from the interior position than the guy that came out and went in the first round early on, a guy that I loved, Quinnen Williams. So he's legit. I keep saying this. Gaines is legit. Would start on a lot of teams in this league. So he may not start this year, but I think he's going to have a big role, and he might really rotate in and out with A'Shawn. We'll see. But I'm a big fan of Gaines, and there's a reason why Gaines didn't even play a down in preseason. That's a very good sign if you're a Greg Gaines fan. Who else do we want to talk about? Oh, Traven Howard. So, there were people like, why did they cut Kaiser? They were only keeping 4 linebackers. I kept saying, I was trying to make the math work, and I'm like, there's no way that they're going to, do that, right? There's just no way. They're not keeping more than 4 linebackers. You just can't make it work with the roster math that needs to be made. So I'm thinking, how do we do that, right? And I just came to the conclusion the Rams are just going to have to keep 4. It's going to be 4 linebackers whether people like it or not. And unfortunately, when you're only keeping 4 linebackers, you have to make a tough decision. And the fact of the matter is this. They had to make a tough decision to cut Micah Kaiser, a guy that they spent a 5th-round pick on, and the same draft they got Okoronkwo in 2018 in the 5th round. And they got him that same round as Okoronkwo. They got him earlier. Kaiser's issue is he could not stay healthy. He did not get better in coverage, and he wasn't very reliable. When they brought in Ernest Jones, Micah Kaiser probably could, smell, he could probably smell the blood in the water, the writing on the wall, so to speak. I mean, they brought in a guy that's similar to his game in every way, but stays healthy. And on top of that, you had the assistant head coach, Thomas Brown, who could sign off on his leadership, because he coached that team when he was there. So I felt like that was it. And with Traven Howard, this team really stuck by him, a former 7th-round pick out of TCU. Traven Howard, the thing that he does is that he has that background of being a safety, which is huge, right? It allows him to be rather fluid in coverage, first off. But secondly, when you're talking about Traven Howard, the sideline athleticism. We talk about all the time, sideline to sideline linebacker. I kept hearing people say that about Ernest Jones, sorry. Ernest Jones has ability to go sideline to sideline every now and then. But can he consistently do it? That's not him. This is a guy, he wants to go and, stick his face in the fan. He wants to create contact with the offensive lineman. He wants to, make plays up front. He wants to make plays in front of his face. He's trying to keep everything in front of him. Whereas Traven Howard is a guy where if you're going to run a toss sweep to the left or the right, Howard's going to be there to stop you. And Howard's not going to start, but I think Howard is definitely going to have a pretty big role in this defense. So when you look at that, you're like, okay, well, Troy Reeder and Kenny Young, I think Kenny Young really impressed them down the stretch. I mean, was the writing on the wall before Ernest Jones even got drafted? Kaiser came back and was on the special teams unit? Wasn't he? I feel like he fell behind, to be honest with you. And I think Kenny Young really got... I think I was wrong about Kenny Young, a guy that was a throw-in the Marcus Peters deal. I kept saying I liked him at the time, and when, they got him, I said, this is exactly what good teams do. When you use a lot of cap space and you're going out and you're getting your Jalen Ramseys and your Matthew Staffords, you have to be able to find, it's like the stars and scrubs approach in the NBA. you have to find those guys that can contribute on a very cheap deal. And that was the thing, is Kenny Young gave you about 3 years of control on very, very cheap, a very cheap deal because he was drafted in the mid rounds. So he's still on his rookie contract, and the Rams ate it up. And they're like, man, okay, you take Marcus Peters, and we'll take a pick, and of course, then they ended up getting Kenny Young as well. And so, it made room for Jalen Ramsey, and on top of that, they got a starter out of it. So they absolutely killed that trade because, they were able to go out and get Jalen Ramsey afterwards. That trade, if that doesn't happen, they don't have the flexibility to go out and make the Jalen Ramsey trade. But on top of that, you're telling me they got a starting linebacker. We're talking still, it's 2021, and this guy's a starter. That's a good trade. That's a very underrated trade, I think. I think that's an underrated trade that isn't talked about enough. Kenny Young really surprised me. Good for him. He and Troy Reeder. Reeder's been on the show before. We love Reeder. Reeder had 3 sacks against Washington. He's shown ability. I mean, look, Reeder was a guy that struggled mightily in coverage. He was originally at Penn State. He transferred to Delaware because that's where his brother went and that's where his dad went. There was family history there. And it probably hurt him in an extent because he had a chance to play for Penn State, play in the Big Ten, have that, that recognition. But he went to Delaware because, the values that he had, and he went undrafted, signed with the Rams, liked them, and I didn't think he was going to make the team that year. He surprised me. And then really the most important thing about Reeder is that he's not just his game. Reeder has evolved. People don't want to admit that. Like, if you know how to blitz this guy, he's going to be an absolute demon for you. I mean, you saw that, the 3 sacks against Washington, they were all blitz. But then you look at his ability against the run, and now all of a sudden, so he can rush the passer, he can stop the run, and now he's really started to show some signs that he has gotten better in coverage. But then you hear Jordan Rodriguez saying him and Kenny Young look way more confident, they look way different in camp. That's a good sign, because last year those guys looked good down the stretch, but it took them a minute, right? It took them. There was a learning curve type of deal. Kenny Young knew he wasn't going to be the guy when they traded for Jalen Ramsey in 2019. When they traded away Marcus Peters for him, he knew he wasn't going to be the guy. He was trying to find his role. Joining a team in the middle of the season and trying to scratch and claw your way to getting reps is not the most ideal thing, but if you stick with it, then the next year you can compete for a starting gig. He didn't win that, right? Kaiser and Howard did. Howard goes down with an injury. Then, of course, Mr. Johnny on the spot, Troy Reeder comes in. And let's give an applause for Troy Reeder, a guy that is literally the embodiment of the next man up culture in the NFL. This is somebody that every year it's, can you start 8 games for us because Micah Kaiser got hurt? Or can you start 8 games for us and then actually start the rest of the year because Traven Howard got hurt and our plans got foiled? Yeah, I could do that. That's been Troy Reeder. So in response to that, now Troy Reeder is starting heading into the season. So props to him. Love to see UDFAs making names for themselves. I mean, only ever happens to the Rams. I mean, you look at Corey Littleton and Rodney McLeod. I mean, this stuff happens all the time, but it's still really awesome to see when it does. Big props to Troy Reeder, who's entering, I believe, a contract year and has a chance to really, get paid after this season, especially if they win a Super Bowl, like I believe they will. But Kenny Young, you go back to the Patriots game, that pick 6 on Cam Newton, and the way he was playing down the stretch, I think the Rams started to feel really good about him and started to kind of sour a little bit on Kaiser. So, you got to keep it up. It's about consistency in this league, and if you don't have the consistency, you're going to get forgotten about. And that's, that happens. It's totally normal. It happens a lot, actually, in this league. So those are the linebackers, just kind of deep diving on that. And then the corners. David Long. I know I get a lot of questions. Why David Long? Why? Well, I know, but they like him. 3rd-round pick. By all accounts, they said he had a great camp. In 2019, he was a 3rd-round pick, so they want to give him, of course, another year. They feel like, hey, we can look at this from the pessimistic view of this guy got beat out by Darius Williams. This guy got beat out by Troy Hill. This guy isn't good. But we could also look at it by, well, hey, this guy's now getting his opportunity. Maybe he's the next in line, And so I think we definitely got to give him more of an opportunity. I don't think he's going to get a huge one because I do think Burgess is going, for the most part, be their nickel cornerback, and they feel good about that. They want to have those 3 safeties out there more often than not, so it really makes things complicated for David Long. But on top of that, they have Robert Rochelle. And Rochelle, to me, his upside is potentially to start on the outside alongside Jalen Ramsey if they don't bring back Darius Williams. With all the moves they've made, though, I think that they can bring back Darius Williams, and I won't be surprised if they do. I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up tagging him for a year, see what they could do with that. But, yeah, exactly, Garrett. Burgess being, that Swiss Army knife role is exactly what I mean. I just think it's funny because I saw Bishop as your last name, and the Bishop's knife trick. I just thought it was funny because you said Swiss Army knife, and that's the first thing I thought of.